I wanted to do a separate reading regarding the potentially harmful effects of sexual orientation change efforts as reported in the report of the American Psychological Association Task Force on Appropriate Therapeutic Responses to Sexual Orientation. This is from page 42. Although the recent studies do not provide valid causal evidence of the efficacy of SOCE or of its harm, some recent studies document that there are people who perceive that they have been harmed through SOCE, just as other recent studies document that there are people who perceive that they have benefited from it. Overall, the recent studies did not give an indication of the client characteristics that would lead to perceptions of harm or benefit. Although the nature of these studies precludes causal attributions for harm or benefit to SOCE, these studies underscore the diversity of and range in participants' perceptions and evaluations of their SOCE experiences. We conclude that there is a dearth of scientifically sound research on the safety of SOCE. Early and recent research studies provide no clear indication of the prevalence of harmful outcomes among people who have undergone efforts to change their sexual orientation, or the frequency of occurrence of harm, because no study to date of adequate scientific rigor has been explicitly designed to do so. Thus, we cannot conclude how likely it is that harm will occur from SOCE. However, studies from both periods indicate that attempts to change sexual orientation may cause or exacerbate distress or poor mental health in some individuals, including depression and suicidal thoughts. The lack of rigorous research on the safety of SOCE represents a serious concern, as do studies that report perceptions of harm. This is from pages 46 through 48, titled Specific Concerns of Religious Individuals. In general, the participants in research on SOCE have come from faiths that believe heterosexuality and other sex relationships are part of the natural order and are morally superior to homosexuality. The literature on SOCE suggests that individuals reject or fear their same-sex sexual attractions because of the internalization of values and attitudes of their religion that characterize homosexuality negatively and as something to avoid. The experiences of some conservative religious individuals with same-sex sexual attractions who undergo SOCE appear to involve significant stress due to the struggle to live life congruently with their religious beliefs. These individuals perceive homosexuality to be irreconcilable with their faith and do not wish to surrender or change their faith. Some report fearing considerable shifts or losses in their core identity, role, purpose, and sense of order if they were to pursue an outward LGB identity. Some report difficulty coping with intense guilt over the failure to live a virtuous life and inability to stop committing unforgivable sins as defined by their religion. Some struggled with the belief in their higher power, with the perception that this power was punishing or abandoning them, or would if they acted on their attractions. Some expressed feelings of anger at the situation in which their power had placed them. Some individuals' distress took the form of a crisis of faith, in which their religious beliefs that a same-sex sexual orientation and religious goodness are diametrically opposed lead them to question their faith and themselves. Spiritual struggles also occurred for religious sexual minorities due to struggling with conservatively religious family, friends, and communities who thought differently than they did. The distress experienced by religious individuals appeared intense, for not only did they face sexual stigma from society at large, but also messages from their faith that they were deficient, sinful, deviant, and possibly unworthy of salvation unless they changed their sexual orientation. These spiritual struggles had mental health consequences. Clinical publications and studies of religious clients, both male and female, have described individuals who felt culpable, unacceptable, unforgiven, disillusioned, and distressed due to the conflict between their same-sex sexual attractions and religion. The inability to integrate religion and sexual orientation into a religiously sanctioned life, i.e., one that provides an option for positive self-esteem and religiously sanctioned sexuality and family life, has been described as causing great emotional distress. These spiritual struggles were sometimes associated with anxiety, panic disorders, depression, and suicidality, regardless of the level of religiosity or the perception of religion as a source of comfort and coping. The emotional reactions reported in the literature on SOCE among religious individuals are consistent with the literature in the psychology of religion that describes both the impact of an inability to live up to religious motivations and the effects of religion and positive and negative religious coping. Some individuals coped by trying to compartmentalize their sexual orientation and religious identities and behaviors, or to suppress one identity in favor of another. Belief came as some sought repentance from their sins, but others continued to feel isolated and unacceptable in both religious and sexual minority communities. As an alternative, some with strong religious motivations and purpose were willing to make sexual abstinence a goal and to limit sexual and romantic needs in order to achieve congruence with their religious beliefs. These choices are consistent with the psychology of religion that emphasizes religious motivations and purpose. Success with this choice varied greatly and appeared successful in a minority of participants of studies, although not always in the long term, and both positive and negative mental health effects have been reported. Some conservatively religious individuals felt a need to change their sexual orientation because of the positive benefits that some individuals found from religion, e.g., community, mode of life, values, sense of purpose. Others hoped that being heterosexual would permit them to avoid further negative emotions, e.g., self-hatred, unacceptability, isolation, confusion, rejection, and suicidality, and expulsion from their religious community. The literature on non-Christian religious denominations is very limited, and no detailed literature was found on most faiths that differed from the descriptions cited previously. There is limited information on the specific concerns of observant and Orthodox Jews. This work stresses the conflicts that emerge within a communal and insular culture that values obedience to religious law and separates itself from mainstream society and other faiths, including mainstream LGBT communities, thus isolating those in conflict and distress. As marriage, family, and community are the central units of life within such a religious context, LGBT individuals do not have a place in Orthodox Judaism and traditional Jewish society, and may fear losing contact with family and society or bringing shame and negative consequences to their family if their sexual orientation is disclosed. Many of the responses and concerns of the conservative Christian population appear relevant to those who are Orthodox Jews, especially those that arise from the conflicts of faith and sexual orientation, such as feelings of guilt, doubt, crisis of faith, unworthiness, and despair. This is from pages 50 through 51 under the heading Perceived Negatives of SOCE. Participants in the studies by Beckstedt and Morrow, 2004, and Shidlow and Schroeder, 2002, describe the harm they experienced as a. Decreased self-esteem and authenticity to others, b. Increased self-hatred and negative perceptions of homosexuality, c. Confusion, depression, guilt, helplessness, hopelessness, shame, social withdrawal, and suicidality, d. Anger at and a sense of betrayal by SOCE providers, e. An increase in substance abuse and high-risk sexual behaviors, f. A feeling of being dehumanized and untrue to self, g. A loss of faith, and h. A sense of having wasted time and resources. Interpreting SOCE failures as individual failures were also reported in this research, in that individuals blamed themselves for the failure, i.e., weakness and lack of effort, commitment, faith, or worthiness in God's eyes. Intrusive images and sexual dysfunction were also reported, particularly among those who had experienced aversion techniques. Participants in these studies related that their relationships with others were also harmed in the following ways. A. Hostility and blame toward parents due to believing they caused their homosexuality. B. Anger at and a sense of betrayal by SOCE providers. C. Loss of LGB friends and potential romantic partners due to beliefs they should avoid sexual minority people. D. Problems in sexual and emotional intimacy with other sex partners. E. Stress due to the negative emotions of spouses and family members because of expectations that SOCE would work, e.g., disappointment, self-blame for failure of change, perception of betrayal by partner. F. Guilt and confusion when they were sexually intimate with other same-sex members of the ex-gay groups to which they had turned for help in avoiding their attractions. Licensed mental health providers working with former participants in SOCE noted that when clients who formerly engaged in SOCE considered adopting an LGB identity or experienced same-sex romantic and sexual relationships later in life, they have more difficulty with identity development due to delayed developmental tasks and dealing with any harm associated with SOCE. Such treatments can harm some men's understanding of their masculine identity and obscure other psychological issues that contribute to distress. These individuals identified aspects of SOCE that they perceived as negative, which included A. Receiving pejorative or false information regarding sexual orientation and the lives of LGB individuals. B. Encountering overly directive treatment, told not to be LGB or to repress sexuality. C. Encountering treatments based on unsubstantiated theories or methods. D. Being misinformed about the likelihood of treatment outcomes, i.e. sexual orientation change. E. Receiving inadequate information about alternative options. And F. Being blamed for lack of progressive therapy. Some participants in Schroeder and Shidlow's 2001 study reported feeling coerced by their psychotherapist or religious institution to remain in treatment and pressured to represent to others that they had achieved a, quote, successful orientation, end quote, to heterosexuality. So those are the quotes from the report, which I found pertinent to discussing the potentially harmful effects of undergoing such therapy. You may also find it interesting to read pages 49 and 51 under the headings Perceived Positives of SOCE and Religiously Oriented Mutual Support Groups. And here's one example of something which was perceived as a positive. Quote, such groups built hope, recovery, and relapse into an ex-gay identity, thus expecting same-sex sexual behaviors and conceiving them as opportunities for repentance and forgiveness. I would also recommend most reading chapters 3 through 5, a systematic review of research on the efficacy of SOCE, a systematic review of research on the efficacy of SOCE outcomes, and research on adults who undergo sexual orientation change efforts. Thank you for watching.